Hey, you're listening to the Riverdale Podcast. This is episode number 78. My name is Jonathan. Welcome to lovely Riverdale, USA. This is a weekly Archie Comics fan podcast. We're here every Saturday morning, and every week we break things down into 4 categories. The first category is the book of the week. That is the comic book I read this week. Sometimes it's a new comic book, sometimes it's an old comic book, but it's always an Archie comic book. We move then to the news of the week. That's what happened in the world of Archie in the week since our last podcast. We then jump to new releases. That's what came out this past Wednesday and what will be coming up this coming Wednesday from Archie Comics. And we're going to wrap things up today with listener email. So it's going to be a fun show, a bunch of news this week. Good stuff going on. Let's get into the book of the week. This week's book of the week, a classic issue. This is Archie's Girls, Betty and Veronica, number 199 from July 1972. Now, this looks like throughout, it looks like Dan DeCarlo art. It could very well be Stan Goldberg art. Their styles were really, really similar, especially in the late 60s, early 70s, in my experience. Goldberg did a lot of artwork in the classic DeCarlo style. Even over at Marvel, he did some amazing work with Stan Lee on the Millie the Model books. So for me, in this particular era, I find it sometimes tough to tell the difference between great Stan Goldberg art and great Dan DeCarlo art. I'm assuming this is Dan DeCarlo, but we'll see. And of course, as I said, there's no credits, no writing credits. So we'll just have to take the stories and the art at face value. So getting into the issue, the first story is Runner Up. And what struck me as I went through and read this is that all of these stories are dated. All of them, and we'll get into the specific reasons for each one, but all of them could not exist outside the era of the early 70s. I can't imagine these being reprinted even in the early to mid 80s. And we'll get to just why. As I said, the first story is Runner Up. And what's going on here is that Archie and Reggie have gotten to the fad of jogging that has taken the nation by storm in the early 70s. And Betty and Veronica decide that the problem with this is that Archie and Reggie have jogged right by them and not noticed their physical appearances. So this entire story is based on them going out and jogging in an effort to lose weight and appear more physically attractive to specifically Archie and Reggie. And this is not something that you would see in a modern comic book. This is specifically young women changing their regular routine in an effort to lose weight, and specifically to attract romantic partnerships. It's ridiculous. There is a scene when Veronica comes running to Betty and mentions that she's lost 3 pounds. Betty says to Veronica that she has taken a whole inch off of her hips. And then the story wraps up with Archie and Reggie really disgustingly leering at a very curvaceous lady. And Betty and Veronica use their newly acquired superior musculature to pick them both up and throw them into a hedge. So really, you're not going to find a story that's based completely on women's physical appearance, especially young girls like this, of physical appearance. Glad that we're not getting stories like this anymore. Certainly a good sort of time capsule of what comics were like back in this era. Promptly after the story, we get a cool ad for the Archie's Welch's jelly glasses. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these. Back in the day, specifically in the 70s, Welch's would sell you jams and jellies in these glasses that when you finished all the jelly, obviously, you could then reuse as a drinking glass, as water glass, juice glass. I have a few of them myself from this exact set. And it's a cool ad. It looks like some Al Hartley art. That's particularly interesting because we're going to be talking about Al Hartley later in the episode. But yeah, if you haven't seen these juice glasses, you should head over to eBay or just do an image search or something. You'll definitely find images of those. They look great. There's an ad in here through which you can send away to get a random grab bag of 5 Archie comics for 50 cents or 11 Archie comics for $1. Again, awesome. Just a real sign of the times there. Also, we get into really, really weird territory with Betty and Veronica in Daddy's Little Girl. What's going on in this story is the time of the year in Riverdale for the father-daughter dance. Betty asks her father if he will go to the father-daughter dance. He, of course, says yes. They have a very, very wholesome dance party impromptu in the middle of their living room. Her father showing off his old-school dance moves, and Betty showing off her then-modern dance moves. But when Veronica finds that her father is going to be out of town on business, Archie decides that the best way to deal with this and to get Veronica into the dance to which she wants to go very, very badly is to impersonate her father, which is just upsetting on so many levels. Veronica has, of course, a personal makeup technician at her disposal, as she is endlessly rich. And this gentleman comes in and makes Archie look exactly like Hiram Lodge. And you can just keep spinning with that concept. The idea of your steady boyfriend dressing up as your dad and you being thrilled about it. It's really eerie. It's really strange. And then Archie, dressed as Mr. Lodge, dances with Betty, and Betty gets all sort of hot under the collar with the way that Mr. Lodge dances with her, not knowing that it's Archie. Really weird stuff. And then Veronica gets very upset with the way that her, quote-unquote father is dancing with Betty and yells at him. And then Miss Grundy shows up and lectures her about respecting her elders. And the whole story culminates with Mr. Lodge canceling his plans, showing up, and trading places with Archie and heading into the dance himself. And then things go totally off the rails with this story, as if all of this weren't bizarre and oddly complicated. Veronica's actual father shows up. Veronica shouts at him as though he's Archie. And then, in the weirdest part of this story, Mr. Lodge spanks Veronica in front of all of her peers. And he has this weird sort of sadistic grin on his face, and she's like yelping in pain. And she still thinks it's Archie. The whole thing is weird. It doesn't wrap up with a particularly satisfying gag at the end. It's just a real strange story. Again, nothing we're going to see in modern times for sure. Again, an interesting time capsule, better left back in 1972. We get a few letters in here from readers, folks that have problems and have written into Betty and Veronica in the Dear Betty and Veronica column. This is pretty good. There's a short one here I'll read. I like a boy in my classroom. I'm too chicken to tell him or ask if he likes me. What do you think I should do? Signed Anonymous in Portageville, Montana. Benny and Veronica write back, people can often tell if they are liked, even if they are not actually told in so many words. If this boy likes you, you would certainly know about it. That's weird advice to give a child, for sure. We get a great one-pager of excellent Joe Edwards art. It's a Little Jinx story, just a short 5-panel gag, a lot of fun. And we wrap up the issue with Benny and Veronica in Split Personality. This is a little odd in a lot of ways. This is a story that's told entirely through narration, through caption boxes. There are no actual word balloons throughout here. And it seems to be like a really wordy rumination on like split personalities and how Betty and Veronica are themselves different in sort of mirror images of each other, and how Archie is attracted to them in different ways and shows different sides of his personality. It's a really, really odd story. But that wraps up the issue. And all in all, as I've said, an issue better left back in 1972. But some fun art, some interesting stories, a weird image of Hiram Lodge spanking his daughter in the middle of a school dance. You can't beat it. And that is the book of the week, the July 1972 issue of Archie's Girls, Betty and Veronica, number 199. All right, Archie news. And Archie news this week, big week, guys. Over at Comic Book Resources, we got a discussion with co-CEO John Goldwater about the upcoming Archie animated series, It's Archie. We talked about this a couple weeks back when it was first announced. We've got some more artwork. We've got some backgrounds. We got a full lineup of what the main 5 characters are going to look like. And this is certainly a divisive situation. A lot of folks are pretty upset with how it looks. A lot of folks are excited. A lot of folks are waiting to see. I'm definitely on the wait and see kind of camp on this. I know that one of the things that got me into Archie comics as a kid was the new Archie's animated series, and that is pretty universally disliked, I think, by big-time Archie fans. I'm not sure about the casual fans. I don't know if that brought a lot of people to Archie comics, but it did bring me, and if this series can do the same, certainly I am all for it. But, as I said, over on Comic Book Resources, they talked to John Goldwater, and he is totally excited. They talked to him a bit about when we're going to see it, which it looks like a fall 2014 release for this new series, which is great. They talked a bit about the Sabrina animated series that's launching in October on the Hub. That's also by the same production company, the French company Moonscoop. And I had become concerned about the Sabrina series. It didn't seem to be getting a lot of press, so it's good to see folks talking about it. And John Goldwater sort of teased and talked about things that would be coming up in the future as far as licensed products, as far as other properties that Archie owns that he'd like to see optioned into animated series and things like that. He mentioned specifically Katie Keene. He mentioned Cosmo the Merry Martian. He mentioned Jinx. All of this stuff I agree would make for excellent televised entertainment and animation. But you'll definitely want to check out that article over on Comic Book Resources. Major Spoilers has a bunch of early production artwork that they posted. A lot of penciled storyboard stuff for the series that's in production now for It's Archie. Really excited about that. Also this week, Comic Book Resources, again, posted a sort of blow-by-blow of Archie's panel at Fan Expo Canada. So you'll want to head over and check that out. No big announcements there, but some fun stuff, some interactions between the audience and creators that are discussed there. This week, Bleeding Cool announced a bunch of Archie collections that are coming up in 2014. This seemed like an odd announcement to make, but here it is. So let's talk about it. A lot of stuff we knew about. The rest of the Worlds Collide trades that's being broken up into 3 trades. We're getting the latter 2 in 2014. And the continuation of a lot of the Sonic series. Obviously, those are going to be continuing next year. And a few surprises in there for sure. There is a book of the early years of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, 62 to 65. That's going to be a trade paperback for $9.99. Crazy that I assume that's all of the early appearances of her in the Madhouse books, but maybe that gets into her regular series. I'm not sure. I guess we'll wait and see. We're going to see that next summer. Also announced in this list is Sam Hill being written by Tom DeFalco. I had no idea about that series. I'm super, super excited about it. It's apparently going to be part of the Red Circle continuity. And Sam Hill we're going to see in upcoming issues of Life with Archie. This is a classic detective character from back in the day, probably back in the 40s and 50s, who is being brought back. So exciting stuff on this list. More 1,000-page digests, more comic spectaculars. Those are the little $5.99 trades. Looks like a lot of great collections coming up. And we know from past stories that Archie is pushing into the book market as much as they can and putting out as many collected editions as possible. And this is proof positive of that. They've got a great selection of trade paperbacks coming up in the next year or so. So that was an exciting thing to come out this week. Also, I've been meaning to mention on social media, Fox Fridays. This is something that's being posted, I believe, on all of Archie's social media stuff, but definitely on the New Crusaders social media stuff. Every Friday, they're posting some early pencil sketches and things like that for the Fox series that's being worked on by Mark Waid and Dean Haspiel. So they're showing you early pages, penciled pages of stuff that you're going to see in upcoming issues of the Fox. So be on the lookout for that, Fox Fridays. Also finally this week, Goji Games has released an update to the Archie Comics game, the Archie Comics app that launched just a couple months back. I guess they fixed a bunch of bugs. I haven't been in to update it and check it out. But if you haven't been playing the game, you'll definitely want to check out that update. They updated the artwork to more of it looks like a Dan Parent style artwork, like he's come in and drawn them, as opposed to being the promotional image being them as they appear in the game. Like I said, haven't been in to check it out, but if you are playing the game, you'll definitely want to get that app update. So that is all the big news this week. Great stuff going on with the Archie animated universe. They had a rundown of the panel from Fan Expo. We got to look at the upcoming Archie collections for 2014. You'll want to be checking out Fox Fridays, and you'll definitely want to get the update for the Archie app game. To get links to all of this information, head over to riverdalePodcast.com. Click on the links. There'll be a post for this episode. It'll have all the links to all of those stories. You'll definitely want to check them out. New releases for this past Wednesday, August the 28th, is a single release. This week we got Sabrina the Teenage Witch, The Magic Within, Volume 3 for $10.99. Coming up next week, September is upon us. September 4th, we're going to get Archie number 647 for $2.99. We're going to get Betty and Veronica Double Digest number 215 for $3.99. The Sonic Super Special Magazine number 8 for $9.99. Sonic the Hedgehog number 252 for $2.99, and Sonic Select Volume 8 for $11.99. On the digital side of things, this week we got a couple of next week's issues early. We'll get the print editions, just like I said, this coming Wednesday, and the digital editions are hanging out in the digital store just waiting for you. That is Betty and Veronica number 215 for $3.99, and the Sonic Super Special number 8 for $9.99. Also this week on the digital comic app and at digital.archiecomics.com, the second issue of Dilton. This is the Dilton solo series. I'm assuming it's a miniseries, probably 4 issues. We'll have to wait and see, but that second issue is up for $2.99. And those are your new releases for this past Wednesday, the 28th, this coming Wednesday, September the 4th, and your digital releases for the week from Archie Comics. Finally today, I wanted to get to a listener email with a couple of questions. This is from Terry. And Terry asks, have you ever done an episode talking about your own personal history with the podcast? I would love to hear it. Also, I would love to hear a discussion of my own personal favorite cartoonist, Al Hartley. Now it's like all anyone says about him is his Christian cartoons, but in my humble opinion, he's on par with DeCarlo in shorts. Just some friendly suggestions for you. Feel free to ignore them. Thanks again, Terry. So thanks so much for writing, Terry. Appreciate the questions. I feel Terry also added some compliments about the show, which I omitted humbly. But to get to Terry's questions, I have talked about how I got into doing the podcast, but I guess that was like a year or so ago. I had a lot of new listeners since then. But my personal history with the podcast is that I read Archie comics as a child, as probably all of you did. I read them really sporadically through my teens and early 20s. Sometimes even sort of ironically, I read them as sort of an interesting curiosity or whatever. I'm not sure what my frame of mind was. But in the last probably 7 years or so, I've been getting more and more into it. Certainly, as I talked about last week, the freshman year storyline, that drew me in. And that was followed up really quickly with the wedding storyline. And that was followed up quickly with the Life with Archie book. So there's been a lot of great product coming from Archie Comics, and a lot of stuff I've just been buying up and reading and really, really loving. And concurrently with that, I was getting really into podcasts. Listening to podcasts is probably my primary source of entertainment outside of comics. I walk a lot. I don't drive a lot. So I usually have my headphones on, walking to work, going wherever, running errands. And I'm always listening to podcasts. And I went specifically looking for an Archie Comics podcast. Certainly there are DC Comics-centered podcasts. There are Marvel-centered podcasts. There are Star Trek-centered podcasts, Star Wars-centered podcasts, any sort of little niche of fandom, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, whatever else. And there was no Archie Comics podcast. So I gave it some thought. I thought about it for a while and decided that there was enough product coming out to talk about. There was enough of a news cycle to have something to discuss every week. And so I sort of pieced together the format of the show in this sort of 4-part format for every week. And I decided to go for it. And thankfully, I have enough of a listenership that are excited to hear it that I get to do it every week. And that's super exciting for me. It's been a lot of fun. I've got to meet or at least talk to and interview a lot of folks that make Archie Comics. And that's really rad. On to your second question, Terry. Al Hartley. Al Hartley is a bit of a mystery for me. And as you mentioned in your letter, Al Hartley was responsible for the Spire Christian-themed Archie comics. He drew a lot of stuff for Spire Comics. He became a born-again Christian later in his life and worked for Spire and was instrumental in licensing the Archie characters and bringing them into Spire Christian Comics. And he did a series of maybe 18 or 20 different intensely Christian-themed Archie comics. And they were in production. They were reprinted many, many times and were printed through the mid-'70s into the early '80s. And they're out there, and they're easy enough to find, and they do stand out from the other books. So if you're looking for them, they're easy to find. And they're a real oddity, and they get kicked around and made fun of a lot. But that doesn't take away from his talent as a cartoonist. And sadly, as you said in your letter, Terry, all that anyone says about him is that later work in Christian comics, in Spire Comics. And I do really like his style, and I'm afraid that I haven't been able to really zero in on his style and get a sense of him at all, really. I know that one of the things that's been really helpful, other folks that you mentioned in this letter, you mentioned that he's on par with DiCarlo and Schwartz, and both DiCarlo and Schwartz have had those great IDW best of editions where you can flip through and really get a sense of their style. I know that I've read tons of Al Hartley stories, but I'm maybe not as aware of them, or I'm not able to look at a series of them all in a row and get a sense of his own personal style. So I will definitely keep an eye out for that. If anybody else wants to write in about their favorite artists, about questions about the show, questions about me, to an extent, send them in, riverdale.podcast@yahoo.com. I'd love to be answering letters every week, so send them right in. If you're interested in helping out the show, you can head over to riverdale.podcast.com and click on any of those links for Amazon.com. If you click on any of those links for any of the products that I've highlighted over there, when you get to Amazon.com, anything you purchase, be it a bicycle or an air conditioner or Christmas presents or whatever you want to buy, you want to get your Halloween costume early, anything you purchase from Amazon, after clicking that link from RiverdalePodcast.com, will put a percentage of your purchase amount and send it over here to help out the show. It's a great way to do what you're going to do already. If you're about to make a big purchase on Amazon, if you click through that link, I would really, really appreciate it. It helps to cover our costs around here, and I do appreciate it. I want to thank everybody who's doing that. It's very, very helpful, and I want to thank everyone else for considering it. On the way out today, I want to remind everyone to head over to RiverdalePodcast.com. There you're going to see the cover of Betty and Veronica, number 199, the July 1972 issue we talked about at the top of the show. Underneath that, you're going to get all of the links that we talked about in the news portion of the show. A lot of big news this week. You'll definitely want to catch up with all of those interviews and all of that production art from It's Archie. While you're over there at RiverdalePodcast.com, you'll see links to like the show on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter. You'll get a link there to send us an email with any questions, just like Terry did. Thanks for writing, Terry. Over at RiverdalePodcast@yahoo.com. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, get new episodes delivered to you every Saturday morning. You can also listen through Stitcher, through the Stitcher mobile app. You can also listen on YouTube, youtube.com/Riverdale Podcast. We are now part of the First Comics News family. So head over to First Comics News for all of your news, reviews, and podcasts. I think that's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much to all of you for listening week to week. Really, really appreciate it. Again, my name is Jonathan, and I'll see you again next week here in lovely Riverdale, USA.